Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about Ssangsu Geombup Palban, Form 8, Part 2. This combination is relatively straightforward, right? So we have essentially 3 cuts repeated. So the idea is I'm in my chiase, my low guard, right? Again, I highly recommend anyone who practices swordsmanship to try, when you do spar, try fighting from other guards as well. My personal favorite is a low guard, but because I do Hema as well, my favorite position is this one, which is just a little bit more of a variant, but same idea, our low guard, right? So I would also like to introduce a little bit of historical stuff as well, to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, right? So historical, or at least from other parts of the world, right? Also from other parts of history, right? So the reason I bring this up is in German, so when you have our sword low, so obviously in Japanese it's called geidon, chiase in Korean, but the German equivalent of this is Alber, right? Obviously I'm butchering the pronunciation, but that means the fool. Now, is it the fool who's falling for this, or is it the fool that I'm pretending to be? A little bit of both, right? So the idea is my sword is low because allegedly I'm an idiot. I don't know what this is. This is a sword. I don't know what it is. It's going to just drop it, right? Which obviously means they're going to come in for that strike. And if I know how to fight from this guard, again using like the false edge for example, then they're the fool because they fell for this guard. Same idea with our chiase, right? So chiase, my sword is low, meaning they're far more likely to do an overhead strike, especially, well actually it could be over this way, but they'll be smarter to be striking on this way if they know what's going with the sword. However, we're going to assume just sword's low, they're more likely to do an overhead strike of some sort. So one thing that in history, or historical single-edged weapons, you find this a lot in Chinese Dao, for example, is a lot of your deflections use the back of the sword. Many different reasons, right? So one of them, you want to maintain like a nice edge to our sword, as well as the back being a little bit softer, at least according to more Japanese style swords, where it can absorb a little more of the blow without chipping. Not a ton, but a little bit more, right? So if we do have a strike coming in, it would make sense for me to use the false edge or the back of the sword to strike it out of the way. Additionally, this may not necessarily have to be a strike. It could just be a guard. They could be in middle guard, for example. Unlikely I would do this technique if they're in high guard, but let's assume they're in middle guard, or they give me a thrust, or they give me some sort of overhead strike, whether that's a center cut, diagonal cut, whatever, right? So something's coming in, right? So again, I'm the fool, my sword's all the way down here, whatever am I gonna do? Right? So I just love this move because it's such a, it's disheartening to the other person just to be like, ha, sword's out of the way. Now this is where it's interesting, right? So we talked about changing elevation in previous forms. We're gonna change elevation. Right now we're on chiase, which is a very high guard, right, in the sense of high stance, right? I'm gonna hit the sword out of the way. I'm gonna dip below into a sotose to come in for that crosscut, right? Now remember, what is a crosscut usually used for, at least in Gumdo and stuff like that? Not necessarily to do any actual damage. It could, but it's not a very quick piece of damage. It is mostly to get them out of the way because it's really annoying to block, right? If I've deflected your sword out of the way, and now you see the sword coming in, again, where your sword allegedly is not, right? This is really annoying for you to get out of the way, or really annoying to block, so you're going to try to back up. And now I have my power strike, which would let me lead into another set of this. So, recap, right? Something's coming in. I deflect it actually quite powerfully. I know a lot of people who don't practice single edge weapons as much find false edge to be very, very weak. For me, it's actually one of my stronger positions, right? So using both hands, striking the sword out of the way, as I duck elevation, aim for the hip, and now power cut. Now, They have a few options. Either they're starting to back up because of that hip shot, and they're like, wait, nope, don't want to engage. So we're going to do essentially a running combination doing the same thing. But let's take a look. This motion has changed, at least for me. Again, may not be universal, but this motion has changed over the years. So the way I learned it was called the granny step, which I know is not really the best or most dignified name for it, right? So the way I originally learned was it was a very stiff kind of run, right? So we're still here, but it's kind of like this way, right? Keeping your hips above your ankles, and so trying to have like a pretty consistent kind of run this way. Now it looks really, really silly. Maybe that's one reason why it was either changed or I was just taught wrong and there's another way normally. So if you've done this for a very long time, there's going to be another change actually in part 3 that may be also very new to you. But if you learn the granny step, right, obviously it's not this tempo, right? It's still the same idea, but the footsteps are really, really small in the original version. So it's just ha 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 ha, right? Versus the way that's usually taught now is just, you're just running, right? I have someone on the run because they've started to back up from that crosscut, and now they had to either receive or again evade that power shot. So if I just had that diagonal, now we're just being like, ah, and chasing you down, trying to deliver the final blow as soon as possible. So if you learn the granny step, fun. If you learn just the running, that's a little bit more modern. But let's take a look, right? So let's go a little bit deeper than that, right? So the next move can sometimes feel a little weird, right? I know I've made a few videos on this already, but those were made by younger versions of me. So maybe I have a new insight, who knows, or maybe I can explain it a different way. So we've just chased this person down. If we were successful, yeah, all the way there, it would seem a little weird for me to switch to reverse grip and then look behind me, cut in reverse grip, back in the normal grip. So let's actually talk about that transition a little bit and see what might be going on there. But also brings us into a certain aspect that is very, very popular in the HEMA circle especially, as well as Kenjutsu and many different sword style YouTubes and stuff like that, right? Is just how useful is reverse grip, right? Now I'm not going to do a clickbait title of like, reverse grip, does it? Or something, right? Does it reverse grip? So we have a few reverse grips in Gumdo. The grand majority of them are when we're putting the sword away, again, because it just makes the most sense because you have that pressure with your pinky, give you a little more pressure, right? But we do have a few strikes, and this is one of those occasions, right? So allegedly, power shot. If there's still, functional, I'm trying to use very neutral language here, functional over there, it seems a little weird to me, like reverse grip, don't care, gonna cut behind me. A little weird, right? So if we actually were able to finish the final blow, right, here, sure, maybe, but then why reverse grip, right? So if final blow was here, someone's behind me, I just turn. That's faster, more powerful, more accurate, more something that I'm used to, so I'm more likely to have trained that cut more, so therefore most people will have done that cut more effectively. So, benefits of reverse grip, right? Now, is there anything that reverse grip is doing against someone who's receiving that strike? So for example, a turn diagonal cut, two or one-handed, even if we do one-handed, right? Turn here. One-handed obviously has a lot more reach, right? It has the hip rotation. You can use your hip to get a little more power. And it's also easier to get back into some sort of offensive position. So, not switching is faster, more powerful, more accurate, more practiced. The receiver is going to essentially do the same thing, right? So like if I see any diagonal cut, I'm probably going to still have like the standard one, or if I'm feeling fancy, I might do a parry, or if I'm feeling really fancy, I might try to go behind it to really deflect it offline. But the reverse grip is slower, smaller range, doesn't have as much power. So you're kind of like, that's an interesting choice for us to do. So there's really, at least for me, so again, if you have any idea what this could be doing that you couldn't do as well in a normal strike, obviously let me know, leave a comment, all that fun stuff, all that YouTube stuff, so I have an idea of how we can make this a little bit better. But the main idea, and this is not canonical in any way, so keep that in mind, but the good thing about reverse grip is it's, I was going to call it double edged, right? In the sense that one of its weaknesses is almost its strength. So in the sense of, if I'm here, I just want to slash. I'm not trying to cut in the sense that I have an impact. If I'm trying just to slice through, reverse grip is excellent for slicing. Normal grip is also great for slicing, right? So it's not necessarily one's better than the other per se. But if I'm here, I'm grabbing, right? I grab either the collar, the wrist, the palm of the sword, something there, and I hip check to move him, right? And I can follow him, slash, and then go back into normal grip. Remember, one of the things we talked about was reverse grip has a shorter range than normal grip. That is working to our benefit here, right? Because it's so short range, it's essentially almost like knife range, although knife range is actually a little bit longer. But if we're here, and I'm in grapple position, this distance is perfect for that slash. So that's my best defense of this move, as opposed to simply going like, if you know the next move, you can, I'll show you a little bit sneak preview. But if you're here, you can just be like 1, 2, and then into the next move, right? So that's my best defense of that part. So let me know what you think. So that's about it. So we have 2 more points I want to make as well. So this combination of the upper block, crosscut, diagonal, independent of stance at the moment, right? We do see quite a lot in Gumdo. So we do see this again, especially in Yedo, when we take a look at Yedo 3, for example. We see variants of it in future forms as well. It is, generally speaking, a good combination. So pros and cons of it, right, is you kind of need all 3 of them to really finish the match, right? So this, snap! You might be able to land like a little wrist strike or something. If you're sparring, you might get a point. But again, there's a difference between point systems and actually, finishing off an opponent. So you need, this as well as this to get them to back up into this one, right? Because if you just do 1, 2, unless if you're really accounting for like wrist strikes and stuff like that, it's less likely to hit, although it is a very common one that I like to use. So it can work, but to do all 3 of these, I think, is where you actually get the full measure of how it's useful. So we see that combination quite a lot. In addition to the fact that, so this is our second point, we're going to start running a lot more in forms, right? A lot more in the sense of like every other form or so is going to have something like this in it. I believe the next major one is in Shimsung, so that's form 13, but then we also see this in, especially the Bangkok form. Bangkok has a lot of running in it as well as a Jembek and a bunch of other forms. So the fact that we're running is kind of more or less introduced at form 8. We're going to see that a lot more as we progress. But as always, I think I shouted strictly in the microphone, so my apologies. But that's the idea. So that was the second part of our 8th form. Again, this is the form, essentially the last form you need to know for your first black belt test. There was a bee in the studio, so I had to cut that short a little bit. So that was a fun interaction. But in closing, so make sure you stay safe, stay humble, watch out for bees, and keep training. But be nice to bees. We need the bees, so be nice to bees.